June 5, 2018, Jacksonville, Florida. A group of young men leave a restaurant after a birthday dinner. They are walking toward their cars. The night is warm. The lot is quiet. Nothing about the moment suggests what is about to happen. Then a silver Chevrolet Cruze pulls alongside them. More than 30 shots are fired. 3 men are killed. A fourth is shot 8 times and left for dead in the wreckage of a car that looks like it should have killed everyone inside it.
Family friend of Kenyatta and Trevon Bullard tells News4Jax that the two brothers were out with Royale Smith and Jacoby Grover Tuesday night celebrating Smith's birthday when the celebration turned to tragedy. Police say the men were all riding together in this car on Town Center Parkway when people in another car that pulled up beside them started shooting at them.
That fourth man, the one the doctor said probably wouldn't make it, was Yungeen Ace. He was released from the hospital in less than 24 hours. And if this were a different kind of story, that would be where it ends. The man who survived. The miracle, the comeback. You have heard that story before. But surviving the Wasabi shooting did not end Yungeen Ace's war. It didn't even come close. In the years that followed that parking lot, Ace would survive multiple additional attempts on his life. He would build one of the most recognizable names in Jacksonville's drill scene. He would watch people around him die. He would carry grief so heavy he has described it publicly as something he doesn't know how to put down. And the question that follows all of it, the question his story forces you to ask, is not simply what happened to Yungeen Ace. The question is why. Why did one man become Jacksonville's biggest target? Why did surviving not end it? Why did fame not protect him? Why did the war follow him out of Jacksonville, across state lines, through concert venues and hotel parking lots, and years of music that tried to process what words alone could never fully hold?
Talk some real facts, the only getting money was Lil Mitch ass. Stood over him and now he dead, with his bitch ass. Bastard just fucked him an oppo, with her thick ass. Ace collecting bodies out of state, with his slick ass.
That is the question this documentary is going to answer. But to answer it, we have to go back. Before the shooting. Before ATK. Before any of the names that came to define one of the most documented street conflicts in American history. We have to go back to the beginning. Chapter 1, where Ace came from. Kenyatta Tyrone Bullard was born into the same Jacksonville that produces this kind of story with a regularity that the rest of the country rarely notices. The North Side, underserved schools, concentrated poverty, the specific atmosphere of a neighborhood where ambition has fewer exits than most places, and where the street becomes, for some, the most visible path forward. He grew up close to family, close to his brother Trayvon, close to the friends who became his extended circle, the people he cooked with, moved with, the people he would describe years later as the center of everything. This closeness, this loyalty to the people immediately around him is the thread that runs through every chapter of Yungeen Ace's story. It is what made him the person his crew depended on. It is what made the night of June 5, 2018 feel survivable to begin with, because he was there for the people he loved. And it is, in ways that are painful to trace, the same quality that made him a target. Because in Jacksonville's street world in the mid-2010s, loyalty was not a neutral quality. It placed you on a side. And once you were on a side, everything that side had done and everything done to it became part of your inheritance. This is the part most people skip when they tell Yungeen Ace's story. They begin with the shooting. They begin with the music. But the conditions that made him a target were already forming years before either of those things happened. Chapter 2. The formation of ATK and the war's root. ATK Ace's top killers or Ace to Kill, depending on the source, was not born from nothing. It formed from the North Side's existing networks, its existing loyalties, its existing tensions with the crews operating on the West Side and along the 45th Street corridor. The opposing side would coalesce around a figure from Hilltop Village, a housing complex called the Bricks, a young man named Charles Jones II. The streets knew him as Foolio. The origin of the conflict between ATK and what would become KTA, Kill Them All, is traced by many to a single encounter. Sometime in 2015, the two groups crossed paths at a Kodak Black concert in Jacksonville. A handshake was offered. The handshake was refused. Words, then fists. No weapons, no casualties, nothing that would have made the evening news. Just a moment of disrespect, real or perceived, that hardened into something neither side would back away from. December 3rd, 2015, Shug, an ATK and 1,200 affiliated members killed by 6 block members. 1 man dead, and a 3-year-old girl caught in the crossfire who also dies, a child, 3 years old. The war had barely started, and it had already taken someone who had nothing to do with it. By 2017, the conflict was no longer containable to a single incident or a single neighborhood. In May of that year, Foolio's close friend and cousin, 19-year-old Zion Brown, was shot and killed on the West Side. What had been tension became full escalation. Both sides began producing music about it. Both sides began documenting the conflict online. And the audience, local at first, then regional, then national, began to grow. Yungeen Ace was in the middle of all of it, not as a peripheral figure, as a central one. And that position, by the logic of the conflict, made him a primary target. Chapter 3, the night that defines everything, we return to June 5th, 2018. Because to understand why Yungeen Ace became Jacksonville's most hunted figure, you have to understand what that night cost him and what it revealed about the nature of the war around him. Ace suggested the dinner. He has said so publicly in terms that carry weight every time they are repeated. It was something they didn't do. They cooked. They didn't eat out. But that night he insisted. His brother had just graduated. His best friend had a birthday coming. There was a reason to celebrate. He chose the restaurant. He made the call. Trayvon Bullard, 18 years old, graduated 1 week earlier. Royale Devon Smith Jr., 18 years old. 23, Ace's best friend. Jacoby Groover, 19 years old. 3 young men killed in a parking lot on a Tuesday night in June. And Yungeen Ace, shot 8 times, tried to shield his brother's body with his own. His brother still died. He has talked about the survivor's guilt in interviews that are hard to listen to even at a distance. The specific knowledge that he was the reason they were there that night. That it was his idea. That his little brother, the one who had just gotten his diploma, would still be alive if Ace had just said, "Let's stay home tonight." That weight does not lift. It hasn't lifted. It has informed everything Yungeen Ace has made, and every decision he has made since. But it also did something to the conflict itself. Because Ace surviving being shot 8 times and walking out of a hospital before the sun set on the following day changed what he represented to the other side. He was no longer just a target. He was a symbol. He was a symbol, a man who had absorbed everything they sent at him and was still standing. And that made him more dangerous in their eyes, which meant they would keep trying. Chapter 4, the Retaliation Cycle 2019 is the year the war stops being something that can be attributed to isolated incidents or personal grievances and becomes, visibly and undeniably, a sustained campaign of violence with no clear endpoint. January, ATK's boss goon Willie Addison is shot and killed outside a club on Bay Meadows Road. Same month, KTA's Lil Buck Charles Quentin McCormick Jr. is shot and killed. February, Foolio's 16-year-old brother, Bibby Adrian Dennett Gaynor Jr., is murdered in the Moncrief area. A child. March 2019, Yungeen Ace performs at a concert in Waycross, Georgia. He survives an assassination attempt afterward. One man with him is killed.
Ware County tonight, 3 Jacksonville men face charges after a reported ambush targeting rapper Yungeen Ace in Waycross early yesterday morning. One man was killed, another hurt in that.
This is the detail that changes the geography of the conflict. It is no longer contained to Jacksonville. It is no longer even contained to Florida. Wherever Ace goes, whatever city, whatever venue, whatever state, the war travels with him. Because he is not just a person to the other side at this point. He is the face of ATK. He is the most recognizable figure in the conflict. He is the man who survived the Wasabi shooting, who kept releasing music about it, who refused to disappear or go quiet or move somewhere no one could find him. Staying visible was a choice, and it came with consequences that arrived on a timeline nobody controlled. Chapter 5. The music A.N.D. the targeted painted here is where Yungeen Ace's story becomes something more complicated than a street conflict with a soundtrack. Because his music, the records he released in the years following the Wasabi shooting, was not separate from the war.
One of my notes sit for that. They don't be outside, but I know where they at. Ran up in this shit, I went all black. You know that I don't miss. Little boy, I caught that diss. Bitch, they got 50s on this Glock case, so came with assist. Got plenty cash for all my killers. My niggas, they don't.
It was part of it. Songs that described what happened, that named people, that processed grief in real time and delivered it directly to hundreds of thousands of listeners before any of it had a chance to settle. April 2021. A track featuring Spinner Benz, Whopper with the Chopper, Yungeen Ace, and Fast Money Goon travels beyond Jacksonville and lands in the national conversation with a force nobody on either side anticipated. Talk shows, congressional hearings, platform debates. A city that had been invisible to the rest of America was suddenly the center of a cultural argument about drill music and real violence, and where one ends and the other begins. For Ace, the attention was double-edged. The music gave him an audience. The audience gave him reach. The reach meant his name was known by people who had no connection to Jacksonville and no stake in the conflict. But it also meant the conflict had a wider stage, and the people who wanted him dead now had more reasons to want it. Because the war he was describing in his music was also the war they were living. Fame did not protect Yungeen Ace. It advertised him. Chapter 6. The attempts keep coming. The pattern that followed the Wasabi shooting did not change with the music. It did not change with the arrests. It did not change when Kasol was taken into custody in March 2021 and charged with the murders of Bibby and Lil Buck. It did not change when Kasol's own father agreed to testify against his sons. The attempts on Yungeen Ace's life continued. April 15th, 2024. Ace is arrested in Jacksonville Beach for gun possession as a convicted felon. The charge is later dropped. But the reason he was carrying, the reason anyone in his position would be carrying, requires no explanation. And then June 2024, the conflict reaches its endpoint for one of its central figures. Foolio, the man on the other side of a war that had defined both their lives, is ambushed in the parking lot of a Home 2 Suites hotel in Tampa on his 26th birthday. More than 30 shots fired. Foolio pronounced dead before morning. Days later, Yungeen Ace releases a track titled Game Over. 2 words, no explanation needed. But even then, even after Foolio's death, even after years of arrests and funerals and music and grief, the war was not finished. 6 days after Foolio's murder, a retaliation killing in Orange Park confirmed what anyone paying attention already understood. The cycle does not end because one person dies. It ends when both sides run out of people willing to continue it, and that moment had not arrived. Chapter 7, Why Ace? The answer the documentary has been building to. We started this documentary with a question. Why was everyone trying to kill Yungeen Ace? The surface answer is the conflict, Atka versus Kutta, the north side versus the west side, a refused handshake in 2015 that became a decade of funerals. But that answer is incomplete because plenty of people were involved in this conflict who were not targeted the way Ace was targeted. Plenty of people moved through it and survived it and eventually stepped away from it. The specific intensity of what was aimed at Ace across years, across state lines, across the span of his entire public career, requires a more complete answer than he was on the wrong side. Ace became a target for the same reason he became famous. He survived, and surviving, in the logic of this conflict, was a provocation. Every song he released after the Wasabi shooting was evidence that he was still there. Every show he performed was proof that the most catastrophic thing the other side had done to him had not been enough. He was targeted because he represented ACT publicly and completely, not from a distance, not strategically, but with his whole identity. He was targeted because the music kept the conflict alive in a way that could not be ignored. In front of an audience that grew larger every year, and he was targeted because the people who wanted him gone understood something that the music industry and the streaming platforms and the journalists covering Jacksonville's drill scene did not fully reckon with. To the people on the other side of this war, Yungeen Ace was not an artist. He was the face of the people who had taken everything from them. Closing reflection, Yungeen Ace is still alive. That fact, given everything this documentary has covered, is not small. It is in some way the most remarkable thing about his story. A man who was shot 8 times in a parking lot in 2018, who survived multiple additional attempts over the years that followed, who watched his brother, his best friend, and dozens of people connected to his world die in a conflict that never offered clean endings to anyone in sight. He is still alive. What that survival costs him, the PTSD he has spoken about publicly, the guilt of being the one who suggested that dinner, the specific grief of a man who has outlasted people he loved.
But people feel like I'm behind a lot. But I'm not. I'm not behind.
It's not something that can be resolved in a documentary. It is not something that resolves at all in the conventional sense. The question that his story leaves behind is not whether he deserved what happened to him. Nobody in this story deserved what happened to them. Not Trayvon, not 23, not Bibby at 16. Not the 3-year-old girl in 2015 who never got a chapter in anyone's documentary because she never lived long enough to become a name anyone outside her family knows. The question is what a city does with a decade of this, what it does with the music that documented it, the families that survived it, the children growing up right now in the same neighborhoods where all of it started, absorbing the same conditions, watching the same cycles, being offered the same narrow set of exits. Was Yungeen Ace targeted because of who he was, or because of what he came to represent? Survival, visibility, the refusal to disappear in a war that had no room for either? Years later, people still debate that question. But one thing is not debatable. Surviving the bullets didn't mean escaping the war.